Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I just wanted to do a bit more of a chatty video with you guys, and I wanted to go through all of the palettes that I have considered for my Panda palette for next year. I have a few palettes that I'm leaning more towards, but I would definitely want your feedback because I'm not completely settled on what I want to do yet. But before we jump into the palettes that are the contenders for next year's Panda palette, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. But let's just start talking about the palettes that I have here next to me. So I'm not gonna lie, there's one brand that is very kind of overwhelming in the contestants for the Panda palette, and that is Urban Decay. Actually, all four of my Urban Decay palettes are palettes that I've been thinking about panning for next year, and that is mainly because they are my oldest palettes in my collection. One of them is slightly newer, but they are definitely on the older side. And then similarly, we have one more palette which I didn't really want to bring in because I'm not sure if I'm ready to pan this yet, but that is the Modern Renaissance from Anastasia. It's another palette that I've been thinking about panning, but I'm going to get to that a bit later. So I'm going to start off with the palettes that I have from Urban Decay and kind of talk through my thinking about is why I would choose different palettes and so on. But we have four of them, like I said, and the first one is the Urban Decay Naked Basics. This is just a little mini palette with 6 shades in it. It looks like this. It's mainly an all matte palette. The first shade is more of a kind of satin shade. I think this one would be a good choice because with this one I would be hopeful that I could actually finish off every single shade in this palette. This year I'm panning a 8 pan palette, or like 8 shades, and since Urban Decay is known to be quite hardly or tightly pressed, I am a bit worried about panning some of the other palettes, and I'm gonna get into that later. But with this one, since there's only 6 shades and it's shades that I know that I can incorporate in most everyday looks, I am not too worried about this one. The only one is maybe the black over here, but I think I should be able to use that up as well. So this is probably one of the main choices that I'm thinking about doing because I do really want to move out some more eyeshadows in my collection, and compared to some of the other ones where I could maybe use up half of the shades, I don't really know what I want to do with the palette after that. So yeah, that is the first palette that I'm thinking about panning next year. But let's move on to the next ones, which are the Naked 1 and Naked 3. So the reason why I'm doing these together are because I'm thinking about panning them together. Obviously Naked 1 looks like this. You have all seen this before. It is a classic in the makeup community and it's my oldest palette. I've had this for a very long time now, and I have never really been ready to let go of this before, but I am starting to feel like it's time to kind of get my use out of this one and move it out of my collection. So the reason why I want to choose this one and the other one is basically because it is my oldest palette, and I feel like you would have a good variety of shades in here. I don't think I'll be able to use up every shade though, but what I would do is I would focus on the shades that I like most in this one as well as the next one and use pan those. That would probably mainly be this side of the palette, and then maybe Toasted and Smog, but that is the first one. And then the other one in that duo is the Urban Decay Naked 3. This one is also quite old in my collection. It's not as old as the Naked palette or the original Naked palette, but I think this is my maybe third oldest in my collection, or actually maybe it is my second oldest now because I think I'm used up everything else or decluttered things that were older than this. So this is definitely getting there in age as well. And similarly, I love this palette and I have a few pans in this already, and I'm getting to a point now where I am ready to pan this. One of the reasons why I've held on to this specific palette is because I don't really have these mauve tones in other places in my collection, but I feel like there is a lot of mauve tone palette that are tempting me, but I haven't picked them up because I do have this one, so I am thinking about panning this one instead. But I feel like I said, I don't want to focus on just one of these two, so I might actually pan both of these, if that makes sense. But that definitely means that I won't be able to finish both of these, but I think that would be more of a kind of progress Panda palette rather than a completely finish of the Panda palette. Then the last palette from Urban Decay that I am really considering putting into my Panda palette is the Urban Decay Naked Ultimate Basics. This is an all matte palette that I have actually barely used in my collection. It looks like this. I have one pan in here, but that is basically the only shade that I've really used much, and it's because I have that in my Panda's eyeshadows. I'm really disappointed that I haven't really reached for this palette at all, and it's something that I've been considering decluttering or getting rid of. But for some reason it's just a lot of shades in here that I know I could use on an everyday basis. But again, I think this shade Faith, which is kind of like a nice transition shade, is something that I could reach for quite often. I believe that one took me 55 uses to pan on, and that is just a tiny pan, so there's no way I would be able to use every single shade up in this palette. But if the formula was just slightly less hard pressed, this is definitely the one that I would go for, because it is the one that I personally, taking the formula out of the equation, this is the palette that I would most want to pan, if that makes sense. So that is the last palette, and I don't know, I'm so torn about which palette of these I would pick, because honestly I'm most likely to pick one of these kind of 3 or 4 palettes, but I mean 3 categories, because even though I wanted to include the Modern Renaissance in this palette because it is also quite old, it's not as old as these 3. I think these 3 are definitely oldest, and then it's this one, and I think this one is just slightly not as old. I think this one is a few months newer than this one, if that makes sense. So this one is also a palette that is getting older, and I do really want to get my use out of this one because it is a beautiful palette, but I'm just not sure if I'm ready to pan this completely yet, because I just love this palette, and it has so many nostalgic feelings for me, whereas I used to have that with the Naked palette as well, but it's kind of gotten to a point now where I am ready to let go of that palette, whereas I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that with this palette yet. But I wanted to give it as an option still if you really want me to pan that. But to be honest, if I could choose, it's probably going to be one of the Urban Decay palettes. So yeah, go ahead and let me know what your feelings are and what you're thinking about my Panna palette. So like I said, just to sum it up, it would either be the Naked Ultimate Basics, it would be panning these two along each other, the Naked Original and the Naked 3 palette, or the Naked Ultimate Basics from Urban Decay again. So it'd probably be one of those 3, or if you really want to see it, it would be my Anastasia Modern Renaissance. So yeah, that is basically it for today's video. I just wanted to get some feedback from you guys because I'm really stuck with what to do. Another quick thing that I was actually thinking about doing is, if I do end up choosing this one or this one to pan, I might actually put in these 2 as some focus palettes in my Panna eyeshadows next year, because I'm going to continue doing that project as well. So I might put these 2 in as like one of the shades that I'm randomized. So every month I'm going to have one shade from these 2 palettes in my Panna eyeshadow project, and hopefully that way I will be able to get pan on every single shade in these palettes, maybe not next year but eventually, and then I can choose then if I want to pan them completely or if I just want to decolor them at that point. So I think that's what I'm gonna do if I choose any of the other ones. But yeah, please let me know what you would want me to do below, and if you have any more ideas, or if you want me to combine these in any other way or anything like that, yeah, just leave me all your feedback down below. Otherwise, I really hope you're having an amazing day, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye guys!